Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card. Today's card uses this set by Paper Artsy Claire Lloyd. I'm using this girl right here in a sentiment. And I'm using my Inktense pencils pretty much on the whole card. And I'm experimenting with some new paper. This is made by Canson. It's 98-pound mixed media paper. It is a bright white, so it's much whiter than the watercolor papers I have. It is pretty flimsy compared to the watercolor paper I'm used to. Even though my Strathmore is 90-pound and this is 98-pound, it is a little thinner. So we'll see how it goes. Now, since this stamp is a foam cling stamp and I can't see through it, I'm going to use my Stamp-A-Majig. So I'm going to ink it up with some Ranger Archival ink, and I'll position it right where I want it on my cardstock, and then I'll ink it again. Now, I'm using archival ink because it is a really good ink for watercoloring, but it does stain. So it stained my Stamp-A-Majig sheet here, which I knew it would do, but it's really simple. I just take an alcohol pad and it comes right up. And you can just get these at the drugstore or the supermarket. And then I just take my absorber and I wipe up whatever alcohol is on there, and it's just like new. And then I just use my regular absorber for cleaning the stamp because I don't really care that much about staining my absorber or my stamp. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend these lines all the way out to the left edge. So I'm just taking a ruler, my T-square, so I can make sure it's straight. And I'm going to draw pencil lines so I have a guide for my marker. I'm just using a Copic liner 0.3. I wish it was a little thicker. I think I might have a thicker one. I just didn't think to look for it. And I'm just kind of making similar lines freehand because it was kind of sketchy looking. So I just went ahead and freehanded those lines. Now I'm going to work with my first Inktense pencil. This is green aquamarine, and you can't really see what I'm doing. I'm going to do a close-up here as I'm making very dark lines at the edge of the image, and then I'm fading it out softly. So this works best when you have more of a dull tip so you don't get kind of sharp lines in your paper. But you can see I'm pressing a little harder as I'm closer to the girl, and then as I move my pencil out, I get lighter and lighter pressure. So I'm just sort of creating heavy color right on the line, and then I'm lightening that color up as I move out. And it's a little tricky around the edges, but it's not too hard, and just do this all the way around my rectangle. Now I'm going to use my aqua painter. This is my Stampin' Up. It's the smaller one that comes in the 2-pack. It is my favorite aqua painter because I feel like I get a really nice steady stream of water. Now I'm going to start in my white area, and then I'll move my aqua painter all the way to the edge, but I'm not going to go spend too much time putting water on the edge because I really want it to be really dark next to the image. So I'm just going to kind of move it toward the edge, and then I'll move it out a little bit to bring some of the blue out. And by the time I get, like a ½ an inch out, it's already cleared the ink, or not the ink, but the pencil, the color off the brush. And that's because I have a really nice steady stream of water. I don't think that this is going to be very easy if you have a paintbrush, because you're going to have to constantly stop and get more water with a paintbrush, whereas here you just keep going and keep going. And you want to do it fairly quickly because you don't want the color, or the water, I'm sorry, to dry, because then you'll get water stains. So you can see I'm working pretty quickly, and also I'm using some random sizing when I go in and out. So sometimes I'm taking long swipes with my brush, sometimes short stripes, but the key is to just kind of keep it moving and use an aqua painter so you get a steady, nice flow of water. And my paper is holding up really well. I'm very impressed with it. Now, for the girl's hair, I'm going to use 3 different Inktense pencils. This one's going to be more of a blonde color, so I have a Sicilian yellow, I think it's called, and then a tan and a mustard. And so I'm just going to draw lines within these lines. So I'm following the lines of the girl's hair, and until I get all of it covered with these 3 colors. And then I'll take my aqua painter, and I'm going to be careful to draw exactly in the lines of the girl's hair, like with the line. So I'm moving my brush up and down vertically, but I'm trying not to move too much horizontally because I don't want the colors to mix too much. So I want it to look a little multicolor with some highlighting, and to get that effect, I'm trying to just kind of keep the lines that I drew with the pencils onto the paper. So I'm going to move it up and down, and that's fine, but not too much side to side. Now there'll be a little bit where I have to go side to side because I don't have the pencil covering every single little area of her hair, but that's fine just to cover up some white areas. And as usual, I have my tissue handy, so when I get enough color on my brush that I don't transfer it to each individual strand, I'm going to wipe it off on my tissue so I can start fresh with the new hair strand. And then for her skin, I'm going to use the same two colors I've been using a lot for skin lately, and it's Mid Vermilion and Willow. And the first thing I like to do when I'm doing skin is to make sure I don't get any water stains. I cover the whole thing with water first. And then I'll pick up a little bit of each color. One is more of an orangey color and one is more of a brown color. And I always start in the same area, the same dark area, and I pull the color out. And I do this really slowly because skin, you don't want to mess it up. You don't want it to be too dark. So I add a little bit of color at a time, and it usually takes me a pretty long time to cover a face. And so I am really working this paper. Now, if I had Ranger watercolor paper and I was putting this much water and putting this much brushing on it, it would have pilled up a long time ago. And that's the one thing I don't like about the Ranger paper, is that it does pill up pretty quickly. The Strathmore doesn't pill up hardly at all. And so I was really anxious to test this out, because this is pretty much as white as the Ranger watercolor paper, which to me is the biggest benefit of that paper, is how stark white it is. So it actually worked out great. Now I slowed it down here so you can see I did put a little bit too much color on her neck. I wasn't happy with it. So because I had laid all that water down ahead of time, it was plenty wet enough for me to put a tissue just to kind of blot it. And the color came right up, and then I could start over. Now I'm also using two different colors, a blue and a green, for her eyes, and then a red just to fill in her lips. And notice I'm just pulling the color up from the pencil to get enough to cover that small area. Now I wanted to show you, now this paper, as I said earlier, is pretty flimsy. It's kind of thin, and you can see how it is warping a lot because it's so thin. But overall, I really like it. So now I'm just going to stamp a sentiment in the lower left-hand corner. I'm using the same archival ink and my Stamp-A-Majig to make sure I get it lined up just right in that corner. And now I'm going to put some ATG tape runner on the back of my cardstock, and I'm really putting a lot on here because I want to see what happens when I actually put this cardstock on a card base. Now I think because the card base, it's Neenah Solar White 80 pound, it's pretty thick, and so it really eliminated a lot of the warping because that paper is so thin. Once it adhered to my card base, it was fine, so I was really happy with that. Now I wanted the word big to be dream big, so I found the word big in one of my Lawn Fawn sets. I'm just covering up the wish in multiple layers of surgical tape, and I'm going to use my VersaFine pigment ink because I find that the dye inks are absorb a little bit more into that masking tape, and I didn't want anything to get through there. So I think the pigment inks are better in that situation. And then I wanted a period just to make it more of a statement, so I just took my pen and added one. And that's the card for today. So I'm really excited about this multimedia paper. It worked out really well. I just got it at my local craft store. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.